All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started now. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Today we're going to focus on a life sciences oriented presentation, and we're going to be spending some time discussing quality as a competitive advantage, what that means, and how we can apply that to accelerate digital transformation in life sciences. So presenting today, we have myself. My name is Jason Sokola. I'm the Business Development and Marketing Strategy Manager here at PercellRx. Although when I say presenting, that's a bit of a stretch. I'll more just be kind of moving through the slides and moderating a bit. But the real star of the show today is PercellRx co-founder and CEO, Dory Gonzalez Azevedo. So Dory, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself a little bit to the audience.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. So I have been in this industry for over 25 years. I started out as a chemist, but quickly moved into the computerized system validation space as Part 11 became the thing in 1997 that we needed to figure out together. Over the last couple decades, I've been working with life science organizations to better improve their software quality testing in a regulated space. And as PercellRx is now newly launched company, we are doing that specifically and strategically to help those folks move into the digital age. So that's what we're doing.
All right. So from an agenda standpoint, let's go over a little bit what we're going to be covering today. So we want to introduce you to PercellRx, who we are, a bit about what we do and our history and expertise in the life sciences industry. And then we want to talk a little bit about the state of software quality and validation in life sciences. So what organizations are focusing on, maybe what should they be focusing on, the challenges that they face from not only a regulatory standpoint, but also from an organizational standpoint and a technology standpoint, and then a bit about what the impacts for those that are unwilling to embrace change and maybe rethink how they approach regulated software quality. And then we want to get into, after that, a little bit about quality as a competitive advantage, right? So what that actually means and why it's such an important philosophy to adopt and incorporate it into all aspects of software delivery. And then finally, we want to cover a bit about strategic assessments. So why we offer them, what they are, and then why they're crucial for helping organizations kind of jumpstart and accelerate strategic initiatives around things like digital transformation. So about PercellRx, right? So really, we're experts in FDA and in software compliance. We have over 20 years of life sciences experience with deep knowledge of FDA regulations and 21 CFR Part 11, as Dory mentioned. We're leaders in the digital validation space. We help to really improve quality outcomes for life sciences organizations by advising and solutioning and managing their digital transformation efforts. We're a strategic partner and a go-to life sciences partner for all regulated software quality testing and test automation needs. And then just as importantly as all of that, we're really trusted advisors over here. So we have over 15 years of key strategic relationships with quality and testing centers of excellence. And we work with a lot of top global life sciences organizations in an ongoing advisory role. So Dory, I think I'm going to go ahead and let you speak to this one here. So PercellRx's mission.
Yeah, so when we were really launching out as a company, we wanted to take advantage of the philosophies of rethinking, reshaping, and remaking this industry. We all know that in the life sciences has been typically kind of hard to adopt or slow to turn operationally, and we really wanted to take this up a notch to move everyone forward. So rather than coming and doing the same old in organizations, we're really challenging IT and quality organizations to rethink how they do their current business practices, not just from a SOP perspective, but also their tools and technologies and their people in order to help reframe or reshape what they need to address in order to move forward with the fit for purpose kind of mindset that the FDA and other regulating bodies want, right? We really want to try to hone in on what is the most key objectives for those organizations in order to do their software quality testing. And then finally, looking at how to remake what people need to be doing on a day-to-day basis, right? How to assess risk in practical, mindful ways, how to reskill some staff in order to get to some of the innovative technology or embraced some new technology in order to get those business objectives met in a much more efficient way. So these are the kind of 3 core pillars that we think about each and every day when we go in to work with customers today.
Awesome. All right, so let's get into some of the next parts of this presentation. So let's start by taking a look at and discussing a little bit about the state of the industry. So what the landscape currently looks like for life sciences as far as, like I mentioned earlier, software quality and validation goes. Is again, I think this is really, really crucial context to help understand what's really needed and what these organizations are struggling with day to day, and then how we can align to help overcome these challenges. So Dory, I think maybe to set the stage a little bit, why don't we have you kind of give a little bit of historical and current day context for everybody?
Sure. So I think most folks in life sciences, if you're familiar with what's happened and where we started, it was very much a siloed sort of organizational structure where IT and business and quality all sit in their own respective lanes. That was either within a total business unit or across multiple business units. And that's been kind of the mindset for those major organizations. Along those lines, from IT and quality side perspective, we've had the approach from years ago of a waterfall sort of approach where there would be hierarchy of requirements that would need and then flow down in order for testing to occur. And that V model sort of approach to everything from a system design perspective to individual applications was readily adopted. It was very controlled and very it suited the needs at the time because most of the supply chain was very linear. It was extremely product specific, either a drug product in and of itself or a medical device in and of itself, and they operated separately. And so your control points in that waterfall sorts of approaches made sense and coupled with the siloed approach. So that's kind of the landscape of which we've been operating for quite some time. And as now more and more even global organizations or the multinational organizations have become so interconnected, whether, if you take one of the big top pharma, they have multiple pillars within their organization, some of which are going after digital health initiatives and other integrated products. It allows more complex conversations in between business units. So we're seeing interconnected organizations, we're seeing combined and complex products from a device and medical device perspective, software as a medical device, software embedded in medical devices, all sorts of machinations of that and how innovation is working to better advance the products that all these companies are making. And then it makes our supply chain much more digital than it's ever been before. So while you might have a software as a medical device that has drug embedded in it, now the supply chain is ever the more complicated. Where does it begin and end? And how many different vendors and associated parts of the supply chain are impacted by changes across those complex products, right? So now we have this very, very, very complicated lattice, I like to talk about it, right? That we need to be able to figure out how best to organize the quality and the IT associated to this new landscape. And in order to do that, we need to have different tools, different people, different processes. And we need to, I think, utilize some of the things that FDA and other organizations have been preparing from a guidance perspective to allow us to have more flexibility in how we define these things. So that's what I'd like to talk about a little bit today. The Case for Quality is an initiative that the FDA had started back in 2010, actually. That's how far back this initiative originally started. And it was done under the Center of Devices and Radiological Health, specifically to address medical device manufacturers' concerns around the burden of validation and other testing practices that were being done. And since that time, there's been many, many other initiatives from a guidance perspective that the Case for Quality and other organizations have been working on, including even other initiatives from the FDA, like the Digital Health Center of Excellence that was started in 2020. So regulatory bodies have been very, very eager to engage industry in transforming how and what we do software quality. But they need our help. They need industry help. And what I'm calling by that is this is the time for a case for change, right? So the organizations have given us the framework to do something different. Now, how do we actually do that differently within our organizations? And what is it going to take in order to do that? So some of the shifts that I see in the industry today are how to do some things differently, right? Meaning, can we really adopt this fit for purpose or fit for use terminology that was in the regulations years ago, but we didn't know how to really necessarily do that. So when this originally came out, we were doing those waterfall ways of capturing requirements, doing testing everything, and the adoption of those principles were kind of holistic, meaning it was either you need to do everything or not. And if you put it in a bucket, like if you did a risk-based approach and you put it in a bucket, there still wasn't much thought about what was put in that bucket. It was just everything that was put in that bucket needed to be tested in the same sort of way. What industry and FDA and other regulating bodies have said is that let's do a little bit more thinking about what is the right fit for use and fit for purpose parts of those software technologies that make the most impact to either patient safety or quality. And so now we have to look at each of those applications or software that we're looking at and determine what is the best thing or what is the most pressing thing. Not everything can be the same or prioritized in the same way. So what is the most pressing thing that needs to be addressed first, and then other things will follow. So that's kind of what we're looking at today. And I think that a lot of folks are reluctant to look at that because there's a mindset of, well, it's not broken, don't fix it. Or I've done audits and I've gotten passed by audits, so therefore nothing should change. And if that's the mindset organizations are at today, that doesn't leave much space for innovation. So one of the key pillars of industry initiatives like Pharma 4.0 from ISPE and others are this concept of continuous improvement, and that's always been the case. ICH guidelines for years have been very clear that quality by design and continuous improvement in quality should be part of any quality management system. However, over the years, I think we've come to the space where we do reviews of policies or procedures, and we do this periodic review and say, yep, nothing's changed, no worries, nothing's an issue, and just continue to move forward old practices and old SOPs or policies without a real look at what is needed, particularly for the future. So if we focus on what is necessary for the future, I think we would look at those policies and procedures a little bit differently. For example, Part 11 was written in 1997. It's a long time ago. And that is out of context of where the industry is headed today. With things like AI and machine learning, those original principles don't necessarily apply in the same thing. So we need to kind of look at it in context for where we're going in the future. A lot of the software technologies that are built today have a lot of those basic features from Part 11 already established well within the frameworks of those applications under test. So if that's the case, where do we shift, and how do we shift those quality folk and IT folk to a better use of their understanding of the risks associated with that stuff? So if we look at things like machine learning and AI, and how those algorithms are going to need to be constantly looked at and tested and reviewed, that cycle of how to do that testing is going to be dramatically different than the waterfall approaches of the yesteryear, right? So you have to be able to adopt agile principles in order to get to a release cycle that is really necessary for the business to advance, really. And so we can't be the naysayers of innovation. We need to be like the yes and sort of conversation of, so okay, so you guys want to embed this new cool piece of software in this medical device, or in this combine it with this drug product. Now, what are you looking at? And how do we continue to monitor the quality across the whole portfolio of products in a more risk-based approach, where it's really getting to the, like, where is the impact now to the customer? Because it's a little bit different than it was before. There are, I think, some very self-imposed sorts of challenges that quality and IT folk have imposed on themselves. And let me give a little example of that. You know, the reluctance in going back to that siloed approach has given this dynamic where it's a us or them conversation. It's quality or IT. And in that mindset, we haven't allowed a dialogue between the two parties to really get to understand each other's perspectives. And in that, if that shift in that paradigm is not able to overcome, then we're back at not innovating to the best of their ability, and not recognizing true SMEs or subject matter experts in both areas, and bringing that to the table. So if we are not willing to come to do something different together, I think it's going to be even more important, because if we don't do something now, these organizations are not going to be able to innovate to the level that they want. And at the end of the day, that comes down to the business models that they want to do, and the products that they want to sell, and going after, special areas that no one else is going for. But if we don't transform that and make it much user friendly, in the sense that ease to market, right? And in the ease to market is being adaptive in our ways in which we control the process, to live more in sync with the evolution and the fast-paced nature of the R&D that's going out there. We're going to be in trouble as organizations are going to get more and more burdened by figuring out what to do with that. What's holding us back, I think, is ultimately, at the end of the day, the reluctance to want to try something new, the willingness to come to the table and just to say, okay, so it hasn't worked and in the past, and what do we need in order to change, to do something different? And that conversation is a very nuanced conversation that makes folks feel uncomfortable at first, but with the right dialogue and the right kind of mediator, in order to make some of those translations, and understand that the regulatory bodies actually want innovation to lead and drive change. But in order to do that, we need all folks on board, not just the regulators. We need organizations and sponsors. We need vendors and the associated supply chain. We need, and patients as well, right, to be able to move that forward in order for the realization of that technology to come to fruition.
All right, let's build on that a little bit then, and let's discuss a little bit about some of the trends in the life sciences industry right now. So you've touched on some of this a bit in the slides that we just covered, but I want to go a little bit deeper, if we could, in a few areas. So what's going on in the industry right now that's really driving the need for change? And then a little bit about why traditional models maybe aren't working anymore, and then what needs to be done about it, right? So,
Sure.
Dory, maybe you could walk through this stuff a little bit as well.
Yeah, so I know agile is a pop word, DevOps pop word, sort of thing, depending on who you talk to. But when I talk about agile and these sorts of models, what I'm really talking about is a mindset change, right? Is how and where to adopt more cyclical, iterative processes within your organizations. It may not be as appropriate to do an agile process in a very direct product go-to-market strategy where it's a single product, a drug market, that is a single pill, right? But when you're talking about things that are more complicated, the only way to really get there is through an agile process, because there's going to be many moving parts to combine in order to get to that final product that needs to get out the door. So applying agile kind of mindset where and how it's appropriate needs some deconstruction. Along those lines, there's also a big move towards, when we're talking about applications, right, and software, there's a big move off of custom true software in operational models. And I want to make the differentiation here in a minute between, there are applications that a lot of companies use that are COTS configurable for your business operation. And then there are truly custom software that is put into your medical devices and software as a medical device, et cetera. Those are two different things. But from a business operational model, most folks are moving towards a more COTS, more standardized way of doing businesses so that you can leverage those software vendors and all of that information that they do in order to put their software out there more compliant. And that extends to kind of how you do SaaS as well, right? So really leveraging software vendors in their areas of expertise. So that's kind of one pillar that I see a big trend in. The next is adapting, CSV to include CSA. And I didn't talk about that before, and just briefly introduce those two terms. One is CSV is computer software validation or computerized system validation. And the next is computer software assurance. And you'll see terminology around this because there was a recent new FDA draft guidance on computer software assurance. And the question on the table, is it really new? It's not new. And also to really point out is that both are guidance documents. One was published in the late 90s and early 2000s, and the CSA is recent as of last year, but they're guidance documents. They are not the regulation. And that's a really important differentiation to make. They are interpretations of what the FDA thinks are some good practices around how to do software quality testing. That will help you meet some of those regulations, but that is just a guidance document. That also is the same for other guidance documents, like from ISPE, GAMP, and others, right? These are truly guidance documents that lay on top of those regulations. How to make any change, regardless of whether or not your CSV process is robust enough and operationally sound, versus embedding some new software quality testing approaches like in CSA, requires internal buy-in to do some of that work, right? So this kind of falls back into, is it broken? Should we fix it sort of mindset, right? Where that waterfall approach has worked so well, why should we even adopt something different, and how? So we're seeing a lot of work around this sort of debate and how to incorporate better business processes in the models that organizations have today. And then the last is around modernizing the entire validation process. And so while the two others were kind of talking more about software quality and software quality testing, the validation process is much broader than that. In life sciences, there's many different types of validation that's required based off of the type of drug or device that you're practicing or are developing. And in order to do this, initiatives like Pharma 4.0 from ISPE is the the movement to digitize the technology across the board. And so, historically, there's tons of paper that are associated with all of the validation activities. Organizations that have done better at digitizing some of that information has gone through a transformation of maybe just making that digital paper. But what's necessary in order to get to the next generation that we're talking about is true digitizing the actual data, and getting to a digital validated state where one can implement and utilize data to make real-time decisions. A lot of the times on the manufacturing floor, this has already happened, right, in many really sophisticated manufacturing floors. But what it hasn't translated necessarily is to the documentation associated to that is required for submission to the FDA. So the Pharma 4.0 and Validation 4.0 kind of initiatives are really taking that to the next level. And in order to do that, you need to optimize your digital landscape. You need to have interconnections between software that you're testing, that you're having requirements on, that you're capturing data on, and they need to be more standardized so that more decisions can be made in real time. That's what we're seeing.
So speaking of modernization then, so why are traditional CSV practices no longer working for organizations?
Yeah, so there's a couple that I've already mentioned, right? That this shift to a configurable COTS and more complex IT landscapes are occurring. This also includes things like private cloud versus public cloud. What data can be stored virtually or not? And that's been a shift over the last, several years within the life science industry, but how to do that now on a more global level is more important than ever before. This is also really super important for consolidation of technical data, technical debt, right? We really want to start looking at that from a overall landscape perspective of how we can do and be more efficient with our technical information. The other shift I see that it's CFCP is not working anymore because we're shifting our vendor models to more of an as a service model. And this is happening in a couple of different ways. One is software that life science organizations are purchasing is more of a commodity than ever before, right? So those software vendors are not only providing software, but they're also providing the area of expertise, or their partners that are associated to those software vendors are providing the area of expertise in order to enable and adopt business processes that software delivers, right? So we're seeing more vendors take responsibility in as a service model. The speed of releases and the associated documentation that goes along with those is at a rate of which the traditional CSV models do not work anymore. We are seeing, from an upgrade per year, or maybe every other year sort of model, to upgrades multiple times a year, and in some cases even monthly or weekly, depending on the software that we're talking about. So if that's the speed of software development and the release cycles that different software are taking, the associated documentation process is never going to work. We have to adopt new ways in order to get to that the level of speed from a release perspective. And so we can't be lagging behind software vendors or software quality in that regard. The other interesting thing that is working now than ever before, I think folks are understanding that you have to test the right thing. And historically, from a validation or a CSV perspective, it was test everything. Those that were able to really adopt a true risk-based approach were doing this a little bit better, but not necessarily even to the level that they need to, right? So now we see a big shift, or wanting to understand what is the right thing to test. And this couples also with the amount of interaction that other vendors have. So it's the relationship and boundaries between vendors and sponsors that we're seeing that are evolving, and then that will also translate to a change of what and how things need to be tested. if you can narrow down what you're testing more appropriately, that helps because it gets into test automation. And if we're not able to narrow down the scope of what is appropriate to test, we can't get to true evolution of test automation. So traditional CSV practices, it was hard to get a good test automation framework deployed because we were saying as an industry, kind of, we got to test everything, so then everything needs to be automated. Well, that's not possible, practical, or even reasonable. So now, if we're changing or adopting how we're doing CSV, we're able to take leverage of more test automation tools that are available on the market today. And that gives us more opportunity to say, okay, so these are some of the things that need to be automated. And now there's a variety of testing tools to be able to help you get there. It opens up the opportunity for things that are available that are advanced in tool technology. And then lastly, I just wanted to briefly cover the overall lack of risk mitigation or risk management understanding. This entire change and transformation that we're talking about requires every part of it and everyone at the table to better understand and navigate what risk is and where risk is in your process and how to document and manage and mitigate risk associated to it. The regulatory bodies, FDA, et cetera, never imagined a day that we would, as an industry, be able to document everything. That's not the expectation. The expectation is to be able to clearly identify what you've reviewed and where your risks are, and then put plans into place to make sure that those bad things don't happen. So if we can't have that conversation, we can't move forward. So those are some of the things that we really need to focus on for this total transformation.
All right. Well, now we kind of get into the crux of it all, right? So in the topic of this webinar, and I've actually heard you use this phrase quite a bit over the last year or so. So when you say quality as a competitive advantage or as a competitive differentiator, what exactly do you mean when you say that? And then why is it so important?
Yeah. So what I mean when I say this is really getting back to some basic principles that we knew were the right thing to do, but maybe we've drifted off a little bit, is quality by design, and really embedding that from the very, very, very beginning. Policies and guidelines have been in place for a long time to be able to do that. But what I think we need to refocus some of that attention. We need to refocus where we're putting our quality processes or control points in place and focus on customer experience and business assurance rather than maybe the nuts and bolts of things, but really take an outside perspective so we can shift to what is important. We need to be able to rethink those agile principles like I was talking about earlier, right? Because if we're doing that waterfall approach, it's not going to get and continuously evolve as we need and get that quality by design. Having quality at the table from the very start when you're starting to even ideate about a new product and what that is, having quality as part of that conversation in order to ensure that the right methodologies are deployed would be greatly advantageous, right? So really using quality as a competitive advantage here rather than waiting to the very end. If we reshape that, we're able to get to really a continuous integration process, right? So I think the software quality world does this really well today. Right. They, if you talk to a straight up agile, developer, right, they will talk about this and they understand this. But when you apply this to a broader business sense and incorporate quality from the beginning, from a continuous improvement perspective, it really challenges everyone to focus in on the right things that they need to test or the right things that they need to document. Ultimately, though, this gets back to rewaking and reforming the workforce, right? So a lot of the quality folk that are in place today might not necessarily have the skills that we've been talking about. And so we need to just upskill we need to change some of that focus and re-educate around some of these things that were, how a mindset shift, but also how the mechanisms work, how the technology works. More information and education is super important in order for everyone to be on board. And then that allows us to get to the more advanced skills in test automation, in AI and machine learning. It gives us the opportunity to leverage things in advance of where we're at today in order to move forward. And then finally, it helps us reprioritize to really to be more predictive, right? To get that feedback loop into the circle much sooner than before. So again, if we shift out of that V model workflow and into more of a cycle of plan, act, do, we're able to incorporate that learning. And with that learning is then a quality by design just comes along. The quality has a competitive advantage, I think, at the end of the day, if organizations are not willing to really insert themselves into this arena in a different way, it will ultimately start being the differentiator. Speed to market and the direct customer feedback is going to impact how and what organizations can pivot and move. Right? So quality has to be part of that conversation from the very beginning. And so how can you make quality a superpower rather than this burdensome, overburdened thing that's been talked about in the past, kind of with that negative connotation, but flip it around and how to use it to your advantage to get to the next new with quality on board from the very start.
Yeah, and I think that all makes sense to you and me, right? But we also kind of know at the same time that can all seem a little bit easier said than done sometimes, or at least it can kind of seem that way. It can seem that way, especially for a lot of teams.
We were still having the same conversation for many years, right? And so that is ultimately what I know you and I have heard a lot, right? Is
yes.
We say these things, and how does it actually land, and how can it translate to action, right? And this is one of the things I think we can do.
Well, yeah, I mean, because really, we talk to people all the time, right? I mean, for years, like you said, right? There are pockets of an organization or people within an organization, and they want to make these types of shifts. They're not sure how. They're not sure where to start or how to overcome internal objections or even navigate their own organizational landscape or politics or prevailing culture, right? So it's a lot to map out. And there's a lot of process baggage. There's a lot of technical debt and just a ton of things that need to be accounted for. So as a way to address all of this, right, and I know you've worked closely as a strategic advisor for not only a number of leading life sciences organizations, but also with technology providers like, formerly Micro Focus and now OpenText. And assessments have really seemed to be a pretty useful way and offering as a starting point for a lot of organizations, or at least, like I said, maybe groups within an organization to kind of get the ball rolling. So maybe you could explain a little bit about what these entail, and then how teams can leverage them to kind of help accelerate things like technology and automation adoption and digital transfer. Or other key strategic initiatives.
Great. Thanks, Jason. I think the how to get there is the roadmap essentially that folks ask for when we come in to do a strategic assessment. And we do a strategic assessment in a variety of different categories or areas, but essentially at the end of the day, we're doing the same sort of process to vet out what do you actually have today? Where are you using information from an overall information business process perspective, right? So we come in and do an assessment not just on the tools that are purchased, right? Not the specific applications under test, but also around the business processes and the policies and procedures around that provide that structure. Once we kind of get in there and look at that, we're able to now, given how many we've done, is also benchmark that around where they're at within the rest of the industry to provide some context for some short-term and long-term goals, to be able to say, okay, well, we want to get here in our digital program for our digital products, but we're still, way back here. And so giving them some tools to be able to say, from a maturity perspective, what needs to happen in order to get there. We help folks to be able to prioritize those. So not everything can be done the same, right? So, and some things low cost or no cost changes that could be made fairly quickly in order to make some rapid changes. And then obviously there's others that are much larger that require an implementation plan to roll out, whether it's cultural or business process changes or technology changes over time. But at the end of the day, the goal is to modernize the entire approach and educate along the way so that it's sustainable thereafter. So they have a framework to how to constantly evaluate what is going on and how to change and evolve their program over time. So while we might come in to do a strategic assessment and put a 3 to 5 year roadmap, that 3 to 5 year roadmap is valid today as in April, and April of 2023, and very likely not applicable possibly by the end of this calendar year, just given the rapid change and a variety of factors that constantly need to be looked at. So it provides the senior leadership team a mechanism to be able to do that constantly and looking at it. But I will tell you, it requires accountability. And so while we do come in with strategic assessments, we also provide like compliance coaching or technology coaching in an ongoing way so that those accountability is part of the process and not lost within the greater framework of an organization. And I think that's also an important thing to make sure that we remember, because it's more than just a business decision. It's not just about the people, the process, and the tools. It is ultimately about the culture of which you are creating as an organization. And so getting away from those silos that we talked about before and into a more integrated, organic matrix that is more than just the individual organization anymore. It's a combination of vendors, supply chain, clinicians, clinical trial management system, like much, much broader than it's ever been before. And we need to be able to do that. I was really hopeful, COVID had some really positive things. And one of those was really showed, I think, the world that we were able to do things better when we did it together. And I think that that's still possible. It's just a matter of we have to remember that we're not in a pandemic all the time, but we're in a way of constant change that could be the catalyst for a lot of improvement across the board. So we do these in a couple different ways. We have a, kind of a quick checkup assessment where we come in and just do a real high level review of what's going on and potentially present to your executive team to be able to help them see the big gaps that they might have right off the bat, or some education that those teams might not have in order to bring them up to speed with industry trends. We do a focused, targeted scope, like a 4-week engagement, and those are typically specific to an area like SDLC or CSV and CSA, test automation. It could be on your overarching agile process that you have there, but it could be very focused in on a specific area of the business that you want us to work on. And then lastly, we have a more deep dive review where we're going and benchmarking with teams, much more detailed interviews with your business units to be able to take a look at what is holding you back from where you're at and where you want to go. So that's kind of where we're using a custom roadmap to build out your strategic plan with you.
Okay. So we talked about all that stuff in terms of a lot of process and methodologies and mindsets, right? But a part of all of this, right, is technology is a big piece of this, the tools that people are using. And the great thing is for organizations out there is that, OpenText has a pretty incredible portfolio of tools that are going to help support and accelerate them through their transformational journeys. So really, it's a wide range of tools that are really, really integrated and deliver a lot of value when they're effectively adopted, right? Which is part of what the assessments do, is optimizing and effective adoption, right? But can you maybe walk us through a little bit some of these solution areas that maybe you see the most value in for software and quality and technology teams in life sciences.
Yeah, so the application delivery and quality stack from Micro Focus is a very highly adopted set of tools within the life science sector and have been leading in this field for many years. With its associated kind of regulatory workflow that can be done with an ALM and UFT and others, you're able to have a true end-to-end robust life cycle that is applicable and auditable for life science companies to be able to take advantage of. And that has been, kind of the go-to. What's really exciting to me is what's next in value stream management is value edge. And as folks are moving to the cloud, taking advantage of the value stream management that is now possible here allows the C-suite level to have a better in-depth look at what's going on within their organizations. And in order to do, when you do that, then it gives them more autonomy to be able to look at their programs and make some more decisions rather than relying on individual silos to make those decisions. They're able to have that information at their fingertips. And so I'm really excited about Value Edge and bringing that to the senior leadership teams to be able to make those decisions for themselves faster.
Yeah, I think another kind of cool thing to point out here, right? So a lot of what we just showed kind of comes from the legacy Micro Focus solution set. But another thing that's really kind of cool with Micro Focus being acquired by OpenText is there's all these other solution areas now that organizations can really kind of plug into from the OpenText solution suite as well, right? That didn't really exist before, and now we can do that in a really, really integrated and kind of powerful way. So again, that's where stuff like assessments become really, really valuable, and being able to take a look at and identify some of those things. And Value Edge is an awesome solution that I think that we can bring out there and start talking about as well.
Yep, exactly.
So, look, I think that was all great. I mean, that was a lot of awesome information. I hope everybody that tuned in was able to get a lot out of this and maybe understand a little bit more about what life sciences organizations are going through in 2023 and what they should be or what they are focusing on, and how Procellerex can really act as a strategic advisor to, again, kind of help accelerate some of those transformational initiatives at these organizations, and how OpenText solutions can kind of help facilitate that from a technology standpoint. So I'd encourage all of you to go ahead and check us out at procellerex.co when you get a chance to learn a little bit more. And certainly, please follow us on LinkedIn as well. We're regularly posting a lot of great resources there for the industry. And we even have a couple of podcasts called Software Quality Today and Women Leading Validation, both of which are hosted by our very own Dora Gonzalez Azevedo. And I'd really recommend that you subscribe there for a lot of great content with guests across the life sciences industry and the technology world. So with that being said, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. So Dory, thanks a ton for everything that you shared today. Thanks again, everybody that sat in with us live or who's watching it on demand down the road, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.